Emeka's visits to the kitchen became more frequent. His presence made Nnena feel sick, but she didn't know how to stop him. Then one fateful evening, Uncle Emeka crossed the line. Nnena was alone in the kitchen when he came in. He closed the door behind him, his eyes were dark. Without a word, he moved towards her, grabbing her arm tightly. She tried to scream, but he covered her mouth with his hand. "Do you think I would lie to you? You'll see, life is better in the city," Nina's mother, Ada, said to her daughter with a smile, as she patted her on the shoulder. "Auntie Shinonso will take good care of you in Lagos. You will go to school, make new friends, and have a bright future." Nnena, only 11 years old, stood quietly, holding her small bag as she looked at her mother. Her big brown eyes filled with both hope and fear. Her village in southeastern Nigeria was a place of struggle, where every day felt like a fight for survival. There were no proper roads, no clean water, and the food was scarce. Her father, Okechukwu, worked the land tirelessly, and her mother sold roasted plantains in the market, but it was never enough to provide for all of them. So when Auntie Shinonso, who lived in Lagos, offered to take Nnena in and give her an opportunity to go to school, Ada was torn but decided that it was the best chance for her daughter. She had dreamed of this day for years, knowing that the city could offer opportunities they could never dream of back home. "Be good, my daughter. Do well in school, and don't forget where you come from," Ada whispered, her voice low as she held Nnena tightly in her arms. "Make us proud." Nnena nodded quietly, though her heart was heavy. She didn't know what awaited her in Lagos, but she trusted her mother. The night before she left, she lay awake, wondering about the tall buildings, the bustling streets, and the strangers she would meet. The journey was long, and by the time they arrived at Auntie Shinonso's house in Lagos, Nnena felt both tired and excited. The sounds of honking cars, the rush of people, and the constant movement filled her senses. It was nothing like the quiet village she had known all her life. Auntie Shinonso greeted her with open arms, a warm smile on her face. "Welcome to Lagos, Nnena. This is where you will have your new life. You'll go to school, wear uniforms, and become a proper lady," Auntie Shinonso said, her words almost like a promise. The house, though small, was clean and neat. Nnena was relieved. There was food to eat, and the rooms smelled of fresh flowers. But she quickly realized that life in Lagos wasn't exactly what she had imagined. The very next morning, Auntie Shinonso handed her a broom. "You'll clean the house first, then wash the dishes and sweep the compound," she said briskly. "School can wait. There's work to be done." Nina's heart sank. She had imagined sitting in a classroom, learning to read and write, but instead her days were filled with chores. Despite her disappointment, she did what she was told, hoping that school would start soon. But the days stretched on, and school never seemed to come. It wasn't long before Auntie Shinonso's true nature began to show. She was always quick to anger, and when things went wrong, her words were harsh and cruel. If Nnena made a mistake, she would be scolded, and if she didn't do something right, there were slaps across her face. "How dare you not get the food ready on time? Useless girl!" Auntie Shinonso would shout, her eyes burning with fury. But the worst was yet to come. It was Uncle Emeka, Auntie Shinonso's husband, who would change Nina's life forever. At first, he appeared kind and gentle. He would bring her small gifts, smile at her, and tell her she was a good girl. But that didn't last long. One evening, as Nnena washed dishes in the kitchen, Uncle Emeka came in. He stood too close, and his eyes seemed to linger on her in a way that made her uncomfortable. "You're such a beautiful girl, Nnena," he said, his voice low and strange. "You're growing into a fine woman." Nnena felt a shiver run down her spine. She stepped back, her hands trembling as she held the plate. "Please, Uncle, I need to finish the dishes," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. But Uncle Emeka wasn't listening. He stepped closer, his breath hot on her neck. "Don't be shy, my dear," he murmured. "You're old enough to know what real women feel like." Fear gripped Nina's heart as he reached out and touched her shoulder. His hand was heavy and cold, and Nnena pulled away. But the small kitchen offered no escape. Her mind raced, and her chest tightened with panic. "Uncle, please stop," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But the more she resisted, the more persistent he became. Over the next few days, Uncle Emeka's visits to the kitchen became more frequent. His presence made Nnena feel sick, but she didn't know how to stop him. Then one fateful evening, Uncle Emeka crossed the line. Nnena was alone in the kitchen when he came in. He closed the door behind him, his eyes were dark. Without a word, he moved towards her, grabbing her arm tightly. She tried to scream, but he covered her mouth with his hand. "Don't make a sound," he hissed. Nina's heart pounded in her chest, her body frozen with fear. She couldn't escape. There was nowhere to go. She begged silently, hoping that somehow someone would hear her pleas, but the house was empty. Tears streamed down her face as Uncle Emeka hurt her in the most unforgivable way. When it was over, Nnena was left crying, broken and confused. The next day, Auntie Shinonso came into the kitchen, looking at Nnena with suspicion. "Why do you look like this? What's wrong with you?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. Nnena wanted to scream, to tell her everything, but fear kept her silent. She shook her head, not knowing what to say. Auntie Shinonso didn't ask any more questions. Instead, she scolded her for being lazy, for not doing the chores well enough. But things weren't the same for Nnena anymore. Each day felt like a prison. Uncle Emeka's visits became more frequent, and with each one, Nnena felt smaller, more helpless. The laughter and hope she once had slowly vanished, replaced by fear and sadness. Then one day, as Nnena sat alone in the corner of the compound, Mama Tund, a kind neighbor who had always greeted her with a smile, noticed something was wrong. She saw the bruises on Nina's arms, the sadness in her eyes, and the way she hunched her shoulders, as if carrying the weight of the world. Mama Tund approached her gently. "Nnena, my child, what happened to you? Why do you look so sad?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. At first, Nnena remained silent. But as Mama Tund knelt beside her, she finally broke down, her sobs filling the air. "Mama Tund, Uncle Emeka. He hurts me," Nnena whispered through her tears. Mama Tund gasped, her heart breaking as she listened to Nina's story. "My dear, you don't deserve this," she said, her voice full of anger and disbelief. The next few days were filled with determination. Mama Tund, unwilling to let Nnena suffer in silence any longer, sought help from a local women's group that specialized in child protection. They listened carefully, then promised to take action. But even as the wheels of justice began to turn, Nnena knew that nothing would be easy. Auntie Shinonso, who always denied everything, would try to cover up the truth, and Uncle Emeka would fight back with all his might. Yet Nnena felt a spark of hope inside her, a feeling she hadn't had in months. This time someone was finally listening. The days after Nnena confided in Mama Tund were a blur of emotions, each one more complex than the last. Mama Tund, a woman whose kindness had always been a quiet presence in the community, wasted no time. She took Nnena to the women's group, a collective of brave women who had helped others in similar situations. The group, led by the determined Ngozi, a woman known for her ability to speak up and stand tall in the face of injustice, immediately took action. "Don't worry, Nnena," Ngozi said, her voice filled with authority. "We won't allow anyone to hurt you again. You've shown great courage by speaking up, and now we're going to make sure you're safe." But despite their best efforts, the road ahead was not easy. When they confronted Auntie Shinonso, she faked shock and disbelief, denying everything. "My husband would never do such a thing," she insisted, her voice trembling, but there was something hollow in her eyes. "Nnena is lying. She's just a troublemaker." But Nnena knew better. She could feel the weight of Auntie Shinonso's words, the coldness in her voice, as though she were trying to convince herself rather than anyone else. The truth, however, was already out. The women's group quickly reached out to the authorities, and the matter escalated. They didn't waste time gathering evidence. interviewing neighbors who had noticed Emeka's strange behavior, and connecting with teachers who had seen the toll the situation had taken on Nnena. The more they dug, the more the truth became undeniable. Meanwhile, Nnena felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of her felt relieved that she wouldn't have to live in fear any longer, but another part of her was afraid. Afraid that the truth would hurt more people. She had always loved her aunt, despite her harshness, and she had trusted her. Now that trust was shattered. The idea that her uncle could have done such a thing, that her whole world had been a lie, made her feel as though she were standing on shaky ground. One evening, after they had gathered all the necessary evidence and the authorities were preparing to take action, Nnena sat quietly on the veranda, staring at the bright lights of the Lagos skyline. She had never seen the city like this, so bright yet so cold. She thought about her village, where life had been simple, even if difficult. And now everything had changed. Mama Tund found her there, sitting alone. She sat beside Nnena, her hand resting gently on her shoulder. "I know this isn't easy," Mama Tund said softly. "You've been through so much, but you've taken the first step towards healing. This is your chance to rebuild. It's okay to be afraid, but you don't have to be alone anymore." Nnena nodded, the tears that had been holding back for so long finally spilling down her cheeks. "I didn't want to cause trouble," she whispered. "But I couldn't keep living like this." "You're not causing trouble, Nnena," Mama Tund replied, her voice firm. "You're standing up for yourself. And that is the bravest thing you could do." As the weeks passed, things began to change. The authorities arrested Uncle Emeka, and the investigation into his crimes began. Nina's courage to speak out had created news that were now reaching every corner of her life. The whispers in the neighborhood became louder as people began to piece together the hidden truth. Auntie Shinonso, too, was forced to face the reality of what had happened in her own home. The community, once filled with family loyalty, turned their backs on her. She was no longer the respectable woman everyone had known. The shame of the truth had ruined her reputation, and in the end, she couldn't deny what had been done under her own roof. In the midst of it all, Nnena returned to school. It wasn't easy, and every day felt like a new beginning. But her teachers were supportive, and she began to rebuild her sense of self-worth. Slowly, she made new friends, girls who understood her pain without needing to ask too many questions. They treated her with kindness and respect, and Nnena began to feel like a normal child again. The spark of hope that had died inside her was now starting to shine brightly once more. One afternoon, as Nnena walked home from school, her heart felt lighter. It wasn't the same as before, but it was better. She had her books under her arm, and the sky above her was the kind of clear blue that made everything seem possible. As she approached the familiar building where she lived, Mama Tund came out to meet her, her arms open in a welcoming embrace. "We've got good news, Nnena," Mama Tund said, her voice filled with hope. "You don't have to worry about anything anymore. Emeka is going to face justice, and Auntie Shinonso, well, she's going to have to deal with the consequences of her actions. But you are safe now." Nina's eyes widened as she realized the weight of Mama Tund's words. It was over. Finally, it was over. The nightmare that had consumed her life for so long was coming to an end. Later that evening, Nnena sat down with Mama Tund and the women's group. They had gathered to celebrate, but it wasn't just a celebration of justice. It was a celebration of strength, courage, and resilience. Nnena had found her voice, and that voice had shattered the silence that had held her captive for so long. "You are no longer the scared little girl who felt she had no way out," Ngozi said, her voice proud. "You are a survivor, Nnena. And from this moment on, you will walk this world with your head held high. No one will ever take your power away from you again." Nnena looked around at the women who had supported her, the women who had helped her heal, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled. A smile filled with hope for the future. She was free, and nothing could take that away. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but Nnena had learned something invaluable through the ordeal. Her worth was not determined by anyone else, and her strength could never be broken. She had her future ahead of her, and no one, not even her uncle or aunt, could take that away.
But the smile and joy were short-lived when Nnena fell ill and was taken to the hospital by Mama Tunde. It was there that doctors discovered she was pregnant. What will happen to her now? Will her uncle be released by the authorities and forced to marry Nnena because she is carrying his child? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Watch out for part 2 of this interesting story. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you'll be notified as soon as we release the continuation. See you in part 2.